Good afternoon, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. I think I understood maybe 10%, but it all sounded very positive. So thanks very much for coming to listen to my session. As you've heard, I'm Hazel Baker, and I'm head of user-generated content newsgathering at Reuters. I work in London, where our video headquarters is for the agency. UGC stands for user-generated content, and my working definition of that is anything that's not filmed by a professional news camera. Now, the vast majority of video and imagery which Reuters distributes is filmed by a professional news camera, and that's never going to change. But as the number of smartphones increase and the networks get better, it's more and more probable that the first cameras at scenes of news events will not be professional ones. They'll probably be smartphones carried by you, I, members of the public, or other cameras on other devices. These images form a hugely important part of our storytelling in 2019. You'll often see them leading bulletins on television, driving huge numbers of hits on social, and generally bringing the audience to a greater understanding of news events as witnessed from everyday people on the ground. So that means I lead a team of producers globally at Reuters, whose dedicated job it is to source, verify, and rights clear this content so that we can distribute it on our video wire quickly and all around the world, so our Reuters clients in all markets can access this material and be confident it is what it says it is. Now, authenticating this content is the major part of our job. I'm always thinking about how people might try to mislead us, both deliberately and otherwise. And with that in mind, I've been thinking about how deepfake or synthetic media may be the next challenge for our work, and considering what we might do to mitigate this. So I'm going to run through an experiment that we did at Reuters in our newsroom and the rationale behind it. I'll talk for about 20 or so minutes and leave plenty of time for questions, so please do ask me at the end if there's anything you'd like me to cover. Let's start by asking, what's a deepfake? Once I found the clicker for the next slide. Sorry, could we move to the next slide, please? Sorry. Okay, great, thank you. You've likely heard the term deepfake in the last year or so. In fact, research by the cybersecurity firm Deeptrace found that prior to 2017, there were only around 100 Google searches globally per month for the term, so really, really small number. The number of searches exploded in later 2017 and into 2018 as the word deepfake got picked up by media reports. The word itself is a portmanteau, a blend word, which mixes deep learning and fake. It makes the distinction that this type of video fakery is underpinned by deep learning, which of course is a subset of AI. The AI drives a computer program to create new, realistic imagery. There are two principal categories of synthetic videos which exist in any sort of number. The first of these is a face swap. There are whole YouTube channels dedicated to this kind of video. Perhaps you've seen this video of Angela Merkel speaking. Her face has been replaced by that of Donald Trump.
Wir Europäer müssen unser Schicksal wirklich in unsere eigene Hand nehmen. Natürlich in Freundschaft mit den Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika, in Freundschaft mit Großbritannien.
So this has been created by first using video datasets to train the computer into recording the patterns of both Merkel's face and Trump's face. Then, taking the video frame by frame, the computer detects the subject's face, in this case Merkel's, encodes its expression, and then recreates it using Trump's face, using the rules it's learnt about how Trump's face operates, making different speech. Let's look at the second type of synthetic video which we're encountering a lot. This is facial manipulation. There is some disagreement as to whether these examples can be termed deepfakes, but certainly my impression is these are the category which we in the news industry need to worry most about. I think they're likely to pose the most difficulty to us because they will present figures that we recognise and who generally have a major role in society in communicating messages. In these such videos, the subject's appearance is not changed, but their actions are. Earlier this year, we saw this video of Mark Zuckerberg, which I'll play, seemingly delivering a speech from his Facebook headquarters around data privacy. It was a deepfake. An imposter's voice was used, and a real video of Mark Zuckerberg speaking was modified so that his mouth movements matched the new speech.
I wish I could keep telling you that our mission in life is connecting people, but it isn't. We just want to predict your future behaviors. Spectre showed me how to manipulate you into sharing intimate data about yourself and all those you love for free.
Now, in this case, anyone who's heard Mark Zuckerberg speak a lot would have recognized it sounds quite like Mark Zuckerberg, but not quite. There's something off there, and it was an imposter. It's interesting to note there are actually several companies who have products now which can synthesize speech. So if we gave those companies enough raw data of Mark Zuckerberg speaking, they could recreate Zuckerberg's speech to an authentic level, and that's only going to get better over time. So I think in a few years' time, this kind of video made with that process would be virtually indetectable. In these examples, the source is acting like a puppet, driven by an actor. In future, such techniques might not be limited to the face. They might also drive the subject's whole body. It's notable that we're talking about this topic here in Munich, because I did notice that two researchers from the Technical University here, Matthias Niesner and Justus Thies, joined others from the Max Planck Institute Technicolor and the universities of Stanford and Bath to pioneer this type of video using a technique they called deep video portraits. They mapped the pose, the expression, and the eyes of both the source actor and the target subject. Then they reenact the face of the target using the movements from the source actor. The neural network, which has been trained with videos of the target, learns to predict realistic video frames for each point in the movement. It means that facial expressions, head movements, eye gaze, and blinking can all be controlled by the movements of the source actor, and they've even shown they can do this in real time. The power is stunning, and there are many commercial applications of this, which allow for creative expression and enhanced communication. Perhaps you've seen a David Beckham advertorial recently in which he spoke about increasing fundraising for anti-malarials, and he said so in lots of different languages. That's an application of this technology. Yet because it's possible to create convincing videos showing real people, whether they're public figures or not, saying pretty much anything you want them to, in any kind of setting, it's a small leap of imagination to see how these techniques could be used, whether intentionally or otherwise, to manipulate us. And it's something we're taking very seriously. So that's the background of how we came to be talking around deepfakes, and it's how I came to dedicate lots of time and thought to this issue. Some research just published last month from the cybersecurity company Deeptrace has recorded that as of July 2019, there were around 14,000 deepfakes online. Now, most of these were on adult-only websites, the porn industry, so they're not very suitable for academic study. We've not yet had an explosive news story involving this type of material, but many people think it's a matter of time. However, there are some differing views on this issue. Are deepfakes really a serious threat for our industry? Let's look at a couple of views. Deepfake propaganda is not a real problem. We've spent the last year wringing our hands about a crisis that doesn't exist. Now, this was from an article written by the journalist Russell Brandom and published in The Verge earlier this year. And that's certainly an attitude that I've seen around when people challenge us around why we're dedicating so much thought to deepfakes. But this is the second quote. Journalists and media need to have robust processes in place for identifying deepfake video footage in order to ensure high-quality news reporting. Now, this is from a research paper published by the European Science Media Hub, also this year. So who is right? Well, I think both are. It's true that to the best of our knowledge, we haven't yet seen a piece of synthetic video that's caused a genuine threat to global news reporting. But we are seeing members of the public question whether real video could be deepfakes. And personally, I'd rather not wait until we got to the point of encountering such a piece of video to have a strategy in place for how we're going to deal with this kind of material were it to emerge. I know from training journalists that the best way to learn is to look at real case studies and to unpick them and think about what we would do differently next time. However, in this new world of deepfakes, there are very few news-appropriate examples to study. So we had an idea at Reuters. What if we could do an experiment? Creating our own deepfake and putting it in front of our newsroom teams to see how they reacted. So I joined forces with my colleague Nick Cohen, who's our head of video products at Reuters, to do exactly that. The guiding principle for this experiment was know your enemy. We wanted to learn two things. One, what it takes to make a deepfake, and two, whether we could spot one. The first challenge was to come up with a plausible scenario. Lots of previous deepfakes, such as the ones I've just shown you, have involved high-profile figures, but we know from Reuters that whenever those people speak, there are usually a dozen cameras in the room, and certainly other witnesses. For me, the real threat comes when there's only one camera in the room and few witnesses, which gave me an idea. One type of video we encounter in our work is a business interview that's been filmed by a remote studio. We call it a down-the-line interview. If you've watched videos, interviews from the stock exchange or from people's trading floors, you may have seen this. They go into a room with a robotic camera and answer the journalist's questions. I wondered what could happen if that recording was somehow hijacked en route to the studio and altered. One thing we were clear about at Reuters is that we could not spread any video that could be damaging if it was shared without context. If there's anything I've learned about misleading media, is that any video you put out into the social media digital space is very easily shared without context and used to drive a different narrative. Therefore, we designed a completely hypothetical situation and gained full consent from our participants, who were colleagues. With that in mind, take a look at this. It's a fictional chief executive of an imaginary consumer electronics firm, answering an interview question in French about her company's upcoming expansion.
Et aujourd'hui, je suis heureuse de vous annoncer que nous allons investir 1,2 milliard d'euros supplémentaires. Cela va nous permettre d'augmenter de plus d'un tiers les capacités de production de notre site de la vallée de Kokoma. Cela va créer 1000 emplois dans la région. Cela signifie également que nous pouvons commencer dès maintenant à produire notre dernière gamme de smartwatches. Je vous en révéler davantage à ce sujet au prochain trimestre.
Now, what's interesting here is that the woman speaking is not French. In fact, she does not speak a word of French. This is how she normally sounds.
As you know, we opened our second production site earlier this year. And today, I'm delighted to announce that we will be investing $1.2 billion.
Let me tell you about how we created this. The woman in this video is our colleague, Tess. First, we filmed Tess reading an interview script and saying a range of sentences that involved her making different shapes with her mouth, lips, and tongue. Then we asked our French colleague Evangeline to come into the studio. She repeated the interview answer in her native French. Finally, we enlisted the help of a company called Synthesia. They're a London-based startup creating visually dubbed videos, just like we've shown you, for a range of commercial applications. They're looking to put this technology into Hollywood and lots of other film studios around the world. Using our video, they mapped Tess's face and used generative AI to learn and recreate her facial dynamics. Then they tracked the facial movements made by Evangeline in her French speech and regenerated the lower portion of Tess's face to match these. So in this case, the French speaker was essentially the puppet driving Tess, who's the original actor. This technique is called native dubbing, and it's pretty incredible to see. The team at Synthesia made this entire clip, once we'd filmed it, in just one afternoon. Creating this clip was an education. We learned a lot about the process and what's required to get the best results. And with a piece of synthetic video in-house, we could begin some testing in our Reuters newsroom. Let's be clear, we weren't trying to trick our colleagues, but I wanted to know how our verification workflow on the UGC desk would be tested with material such as this. Ordinarily, verification is an all-encompassing process. We always look at video in context. We examine the source and the mode of transmission, as well as the content itself. That wasn't really possible here. It would not have been ethical to plant this somewhere online and ask our colleagues to look at it. So instead, I sent it to the team via WhatsApp, which is actually a very frequent way in which we receive video content into the newsroom. I said it was part of a video interview and asked if they could see anything unusual. So how did our colleagues react and what did we learn? We think this modest experiment gave us two things. First of all, we learned to identify some red flags from this video, which could be giveaways that the video has been manipulated using synthetic media technologies. And we also learnt a bit about human instinct. We'll start with the red flags. You probably spotted these too. The first one was audio to video synchronization. Our picture supervisor, Pete, works in the London newsroom. He's got over 30 years of experience working with TV news pictures, and he is no stranger to badly syncing video and audio. It's one of his regular challenges, and it's particularly notable when the material's been sent or filmed using old kit or sent using poor technologies. However, he noted this clip was odd. The audio sync seems slightly out at the beginning, matches more or less in the middle, but then drifts out again at the end. So-called creeping sync is a common issue, but that tends to be incremental, so you either start way out of sync and get into sync, or you start in sync and get out of sync, not in and out. I asked Pete how often he'd seen something of this nature, and he said, well, perhaps once in a decade. So that was definitely one giveaway. The second thing we observed was problems around the mouth shape and certain sounds. Many of you will have spotted something was not quite right, but if you speak French to a native standard, the chances are you've likely homed in on the problem. As one of my French colleagues put it, some of it's perfect. It's the sibilant sounds which are not quite right. Her face isn't making the right movements on phrases such as vous annoncez. He's right. When you watch it again, you can see that lips aren't quite in the right place for the s sounds. It's like she's lisping, but she's not. This sound is clear. Thirdly, one colleague noticed that she was oddly robotic. He observed, why is her head so still? And I could answer that, because when Synthesia told us how to make a deepfake, they advised that the subject sat really still. If you get your subject to sit still, that gives the computer fewer variables to work with, and you get a better result. But of course, people don't sit perfectly still. We're not robots. And Tess had to do several takes of the video until her head was not moving too much for us to work with. So I was really encouraged that our team picked that up. Another colleague noticed that the blink pattern was a bit off, but the team at Synthesia didn't actually modify Tess's blink pattern at all. However, I think it's reasonable to conclude that the French speech with different patterns and pauses may have corresponded to different blink patterns in an actual situation. Now, one major caveat is that these programs are only getting smarter. So these 3 red flags that we identified when we did this experiment, in later iterations may not be evident, and we can only expect the technology to get better. We've got to keep assessing how the technology is getting better and what, if any, new red flags are emerging. Finally, one really important point that we did notice was that awareness of the experiment really changed people's reactions. When I showed the video to colleagues who were aware of the project, who knew we were creating a deepfake, they were far quicker to identify the red flags versus those who were completely in the dark. That may sound obvious, but it's something that we can consider in our training. These reactions on the slide here are reactions that we had from people who did not know we were doing a deepfake. And it's interesting that they could sense something was slightly wrong, but it was very difficult for them to pinpoint exactly what it is. This is why our experiment, while unscientific, was actually a really valuable lesson. If you know a problem is coming, then you prepare to approach it with critical thinking. Without that priming, you're relying on instinct. It's reminded us that instinct is really powerful and we should trust it, but it also shows us that we can respond more effectively when we've confronted the issue in advance. So with that in mind, we've created what we call a sliding scale of deceit, which refers to the way that media may be manipulated. It's something we've built to map the territory and to use in training our teams so they can better understand the key threats. We can use this scale to plot real-life examples, which are an excellent way for our journalists to learn. The scale tracks the different ways in which video can be manipulated, and they're all examples that we've seen in real life. At one end of the scale is zero manipulation, and actually this is the most common type of misleading media that we encounter. The video file has not been altered at all, but it's usually shared without context and given a different meaning. So this is a still frame from a tweet that we were sent on our desk during the Sierra Leone mudslide, which was in August 2017. And a Reuters client said, I've seen this video on Twitter, I really want to include it in my report about Sierra Leone. Can you verify this video and rights clear it so I can put it in my package? The tweet reads, please pray for the people of Sierra Leone, over 300 people confirmed dead and hundreds still missing. It's accompanied by this really dramatic video of a house falling into a river. Now, we thought this looked familiar, so we ran some keyframes through reverse search, which is a technique I'll come to shortly. And we were right. We'd actually seen this exact same video shared just 6 weeks earlier, and it was from Tibet. Absolutely nowhere near Sierra Leone, but it was shared with a different meaning and definitely misled a fair number of people. That was retweeted lots of times, and we saw lots of other sources using it too. On to the next point on the scale, which is edited video. Now, this can encompass really a wide range of different manipulations, but one famous example of this, which occurred, of course, earlier this year, is the altered clip of Nancy Pelosi, which I'll play in a second. It was modified by very simplistic means. It's simply been slowed down to about 75% of the original speed. Oh, sorry, there's no video to play, but that's the screen grab. On the left is the real clip. The right one had been modified, cropped, and was using slower video.
Which slows down her speech and hand movements, making Pelosi look less alert, started circulating last week amid a tense feud between her and President Donald Trump.
Crazy Nancy.
Now, obviously that was shared on a Facebook page, and I'm not sure many people who watched it necessarily believed it to be an authentic portrayal of events. But it did show how you can create quite a different effect just by doing a very simple edit on off-the-shelf editing software.
The doctored video, which slows down.
Now, the next point on the scale is staged video. This is not so common, but we do encounter it from time to time, and it can be quite a serious threat. There's a famous example from 2014 in which a viral clip featuring a young boy rescuing a girl from Syria turned out to be the work of a Norwegian filmmaker. That was quite a famous example. Here's something a bit more light-hearted that we encountered last year. It's the moment that Croatian firefighters receive a call-out just at the point that their national soccer team is about to beat Russia on penalties in the World Cup. Or is it? So this was a fun watch, and it went totally viral. But it was shared as though it really happened. And lots of people wrote comments such as, wow, duty calls, and expressed great admiration for these firefighters who'd gone out without a second thought for watching their team win. But it was actually a fire safety campaign. And when you look at the original post, it made it very clear. This didn't happen. They filmed it. They recreated it because something similar had happened a few days earlier. It was a PR campaign. It's very well done. This is a light-hearted example, but I just wanted to show how something which, on the face of it, seems to be real, might actually have a far more complicated story behind it. A high degree of video manipulation is present in clips which involve computer-generated imagery, or CGI. Deepfakes use CGI as well, but they're underpinned by AI. I'm not going to play the video because we're running a bit short on time, but this is a frame from a clip modified using CGI to show a passenger aircraft seemingly doing a 360-degree roll. It wasn't created with the intention of fooling people, but it was shared by lots of people as if it had happened during a recent cyclone. At the very end of the scale is where we can slot the deepfake, because to create a video of this nature requires the most manipulation of all, as we've seen through the experiment. We hope that our journalists have these possibilities in mind as they approach and analyse third-party video content. And also, I hope that it removes some of the fear-mongering around deepfakes. It's just the latest iteration of manipulated media, which we have been encountering for many years. Having looked at the characterization of video fakes, I'll quickly run through some of the techniques that we use to verify this material. The first one is reverse image search. Now, I don't know how many of you have used this tool called InVid, but it's a free tool. Anyone can download it. It's a Chrome extension. And it allows you to reverse search video keyframes. Now, you can do this longhand if you take screenshots of your video and stick it through Google, but this will save you hours. So we can put any video straight through and check and reverse search keyframes. And if you did that for the Zuckerberg one, as I've done there, you can see that one of the search results that came up from Google linked to the original video, which was Zuckerberg speaking around security, but in his own words and not in the manipulated words. Other techniques, of course, involve geolocation, so looking for clues which can pinpoint the exact location of a piece of video. Metadata examination, we always try to get the original source file for UGC, so if people can send via Dropbox, via WeTransfer, the original source file, we can check metadata. Now that can be altered, but if we get a clip soon after the fact with complete metadata, it gives us greater confidence in authenticity. Corroborating imagery is hugely important. If I only have one version of an event caught on camera, then I ask why, and there has to be a good reason why only one person caught that. We're very lucky at Reuters because we have people on the ground, and very often they can go and check out the same location that we can see in the UGC and film it themselves. Directly questioning the source is key to all of our UGC news gatherings, so we need to be able to apply the same journalistic questioning to anyone who's filmed UGC as to any other witness. And finally, and this is something, again, that Reuters is well placed to do, is subject-expert consultation. There is always somebody who knows more about the situation than you do, and if you can find them and show them the video in question, then any inconsistencies or red flags are more likely to be identified. Now, one aspect which people always ask about is whether deepfakes will be in future detected by automated systems, by technology. And there are many, many people working on detection systems in this field. Lots of fantastic potential solutions being explored. One is the face forensics database, which aims to use AI analysis of large volumes of doctored and undoctored faces to learn the differences between real content and fake content. There's also a project taking place at Dartmouth College in the US at the moment, which is mapping the faces of the presidential 2020 candidates with the aim of showing any video which does not match the map as a potential deepfake. And that's a very important and timely project which is ongoing. However, we don't think that currently any of these solutions are up to scratch, and we're left with the conclusion that actually at the moment it's human judgment and subject expertise and a verification framework which give us the best opportunity of identifying deepfakes rather than relying on technology. The technology will only certainly get better over time and will be more widely accessible. So it's on us all to make sure that we're thinking about what knowledge we have already, examining cases as they arise in real life, and also making sure that our own verification systems and workflows are up to scratch. As I said, our newsroom experiment wasn't meant to be scientific. It was just something we wanted to try to understand deepfakes a bit better. But primarily, we also wanted to build a newsroom culture with an ever greater level of instinctive questioning about these new threats. Thank you. I hope we've got time for some questions if you have any.
We do. Thank you very much, Hazel. Well, we do have a few questions, and the top voted question comes by Chris, and he wants to know, do you think that Reuters will use video and analytics software in the future to verify all video content coming in? Is there a workflow that would allow that?
That's a good question. Yes, there is a workflow that would allow that, and I think it's something we'll seriously consider if we feel that the demand is there. So I think at the moment, the video that Reuters puts out from our Reuters journalists is trusted by our clients, and we're not being asked to prove the authenticity of that. That is, at the moment, understood that this is an accurate portrayal of events. That's very different to my content, which is UGC, which absolutely we have to prove the authenticity of. But as I've explained, we don't have a good automated system to do that at the moment. It's a human judgment job mainly.
All right. Can you describe how big is your team, and are you expanding, or what are the plans for the future?
Yeah, so we have a team of 14 around the world. They're producers who are dedicated to UGC news gathering. We work very closely with our bureaus around the world. So although that team is dedicated to doing the job, that does not mean that we're the only people who clear UGC. We work really closely with colleagues in bureaus who are covering big stories as they happen. We know that verifying material takes a long time, and if it happens at the same time as, say, a major terror attack, we know the teams in that bureau are busy trying to get cameras, people, kit to the right place. They don't have time to sit and do frame-by-frame analysis, and so that's where this team comes in. We've expanded over the last 2 years massively. We've doubled the team. And I think in future, while the number in the bespoke team might not increase, we'll definitely roll out our training much wider.
All right. Second question, do you see any positive use cases for deepfakes?
Definitely, not so much in the news industry, but for people making commercials, advertisements. Previously, you've either got an option you film in different languages, which is costly, or you have to use dubbing, which modern audiences reject. So I think for that use case, for sure. I think the David Beckham example that I alluded to was quite a nice one. It showed how a message could, and that was a charity message, could be spread around the world more effectively. So yeah, I think there are some use cases which are definitely commercially acceptable and viable.
All right. Another question, what kind of fake content have you been dealing with regarding Brexit?
Oh, that's a good question. So certainly the last few months have been all about political posturing. Actually, the most striking stuff was probably around the time of the campaigning. And there's one really striking example that comes to my mind, and I wasn't actually working at Reuters at this point, but there was a film made by a British activist who wanted to show migrants arriving on the shores of the UK, and he went out in his boat and filmed it, but he pieced together a narrative using bits filmed at different points. It wasn't a chronological sequence to fulfill the narrative.
So it was stitched together.
It was stitched together, and it used different situations, and we think a lot of it was also staged too. So definitely that people think creatively about how to drive certain narratives. And then we also see, tensions around immigration have been a huge part of the Brexit debate. We've definitely seen material shared without context or without full story to drive certain political messages.
As technology becomes easier to use and also cheaper to use. Ooh, welcome, everybody awake? Good. So do you think in the future the danger of deepfakes comes from state propaganda or by ordinary people who just want to trick the system?
I think definitely state propaganda is a concern, for sure. And actually, in those cases, it's really hard to get the original source files because the governments don't want to hand them over. So they definitely concern me. And I think in those cases, we're going to have to be very clear to Reuters clients, if we're distributing that material, what we've been able to do and what we haven't. It's not like the user on the street who we can ask for the source file from, and if we don't get it, we're not using it. In these cases, we have a decision to make. And we've definitely seen, some examples which have led us to think, are we seeing everything exactly as it is here, or has this been treated somehow?
Okay, wow, the questions are piling up by now. Okay, I'll try to make it quick. In your tests, why did you make your colleagues speak another language? Maybe the fake would have been harder to detect if one would have just stick to the language. Yeah,
we wondered about doing a version in English, so thanks for asking that question. The reason we didn't is I didn't think it would have much of an impact when we did the reveal, because it would just look like we filmed us speaking English and then, showed us speaking a bit more English. I really wanted to make the clear distinction, so that's primarily why.
All right. Next one. Are deepfakes the end of reliable video verification?
No. I hope not. No, it means we need to get smarter and more rigorous, and it probably means that we need to be ever more selective, and we only move the stuff that we're able to 100% verify. If you have 10 different versions of an event on video from different angles, from unrelated sources, and they arrive in the newsroom within minutes of the incident happening, deepfakes cannot be created that quickly currently, and unless technology changes rapidly in future, which it will do, right? That's why we've got to stay across it. We're not going to get 10 different deepfakes of the same event from different angles. We're definitely not at that stage yet. Maybe down the line we might.
Thank you, Benedict, for the question. Manuel wants to ask, deepfakes, is that able to provoke a world war in your opinion?
A world war? I don't know. I think actually for me the biggest danger seems to be in some communities where media literacy is lower, access to lots of different media sources is lower, and in those cases, if particularly people who are using closed networks to communicate, WhatsApp being the
Myanmar or
lots of parts of Asia and Africa who are engaging and getting huge amounts of their news as well from these closed networks. If a deepfake is shared within those communities, in those closed networks, and there is little opportunity for those individuals receiving the video to be able to research further and see different versions of it or different arguments about whether it's real, I think that could cause major damage, for sure.
On that matter, let me add one question. Do you work together with Facebook, YouTube, and so on? Once you have detected a wrong video, do you tell Facebook and YouTube, please make sure that people understand this is not real?
Well, one thing we're trying to do at the moment is make sure we're clear on those platforms' policies, because of course Facebook allowed the deepfake of Mark Zuckerberg to stay on Facebook. They have nothing against leaving deepfakes per se on their platform.
So that just let it run without noticing the people.
Yeah, I mean they downvoted it through the fact-checking work, and that's marked on. But we don't do fact-checking for Facebook, so that's not something we'd do. If it was harmful, or if it was any way putting someone at danger, then that's exactly when we would flag it up to Facebook for sure.
Here's another interesting one. How's the current situation in terms of how much increase of deepfakes are you encountering today? Can you give us slight numbers of how many deepfakes you run into daily or weekly or monthly?
The number is small, really small at the moment, and so this was tried to be a preemptive kind of attempt to deal with those.
So you want to train your senses for the big wave that is about to come, maybe.
Right, so we started this deepfake research about a year ago, and I really had hardly any examples to work with at all. The only ones I had were from academia, so Barack Obama, etc., and a few YouTube channels. Since then, we've seen a few more. So we saw the Zuckerberg one, and we saw Kim Kardashian deepfaked, and we've seen a couple of others as well, which have been done quite well. But we're talking about probably fewer than 10, which are news relevant. The thing we have seen more of is synthetic images, so still images. And there was a famous story about someone posing to be a journalist who used a synthetic image of a face to make her LinkedIn profile. And of course, those images evade reverse image search. There's no results. So you kind of get this confidence that, okay, maybe this person does exist and this is a new picture, but it's generated by the same technology.
Completely fake.
Completely fake. It's just generated by machine, guessing what a human face should look like.
Okay. Time for a final question. Are you working together with other news agencies to bundle your firepower and your techniques in order to detect fake imagery?
Not news agencies, because at the end of the day, this is a competitive business, and our verification is something that's part of the commercial offering. But what we are doing is working closely with other commercial and non-commercial research and companies who are looking into detection work, projects, new systems, and definitely considering those, and we may well collaborate with them in future.
Well, with that, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and for your admirable work. Please give her a big hand, Hazel Baker. Thank you. Thank you for coming to us.